the opposition has brought out the minister's salaries again. The question is, can there be better ways for such salaries to strengthen the link with the average Singaporean?
It depends on who you are targeting. So we are targeting the top performers in Singapore, both in the private sector as well as those in public service, to bring into politics. So we therefore use a formula which has been debated many times over many elections as to the minister's pay. That means the high earners, and then you get the average and so on, give a discount. You can peg it to the people in the lower income group. That depends on what the pay is. Supposing you peg it to 2,000 as the average, then you times 10 or times 100. That depends on what it is. See? So the question is, can you get the right people to come? As opposition has mentioned, despite the high salaries, we are not able to get private sector people to come. You go and examine the pay of the chairman, CEOs of the publicly listed companies in Singapore: Keppel, DBS Bank, OCBC, and UOB, and so on, Sembawang and all that. Every CEO is earning about twice the minister's pay, even more. Capital Land, easily they earn about $10 million. Why should they come and join us in politics? So therefore, the formula has worked. It has been issued. The key is, are we producing results? That's the key.
Is there a better way to communicate with the majority of the population who don't seem to understand this?
The majority of the population is not very concerned. So all they want is, can we produce jobs for them? Can we look after their medical care? Can the medical care be affordable? Can we cope with cost of living? Can we deliver good housing at affordable prices? These are the issues of concern to them. And these are the issues which the government is addressing, which I'll come back to later on. So the minister's pay is a favorite flogging horse for opposition. And it has been flogged so many times over so many years. Of course, it costs us some votes. But by and large, the people understand. What else?
So maybe you can tell us about the reaction to Osama's death.
MFA has issued a statement, in a sense, they're relieved that Osama is gone, but that doesn't mean that's the end of the problem. You may see an reaction from the Osama people, the terrorists may then be very active, so we don't know. But this is a relief that he has been targeted and he has been taken care of.
The NSP candidate has said that our army should be downsized and we should rely more on our air force and restructure our defense. Can you?
Okay, I think that question is useful for BG Tan Chuan-Jin to answer. It's an important question which you ask, and I think it's time we in Marine Parade zoom in on the manifesto of NSP, and this is a very important issue which I will leave it to Tan Chuan-Jin to answer.
You said that the PP. Oh, do you want to answer?
Yes, of course, you could answer.
Well, I think like I said in my rally speech, I'm actually quite surprised because I think what has been quite clear in terms of the lessons learned in the recent years, especially in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in southern Lebanon, has been that you need the army to play a very important role. It doesn't mean that the Air Force and Navy doesn't play a critical role. And I think in the SAF, it's always been about building a balanced capability to do what we need to do. And I'm actually very surprised because the lessons are actually quite clear. In fact, what is quite apparent, the world went through a phase, I think, post-First Gulf War, where they felt that remote sensors, remote systems, because of the capabilities that Air Force have developed, technology could replace people. But you could see that rapidly was found to be wanting. Even in Bosnia, when the Americans carried out a lot of bombing missions, but without committing the army or ground forces, they actually were able to target very few, despite the technological age. So what has become actually very clear is that the army plays a very important role. But what is actually, I think, surprising is that they are prepared, in spite of what is clear, to throw this cut out, to say, oh, let's cut national service, let's reduce the army size. This is popular, and sometimes they'll cite countries like Taiwan and Europe, but the circumstances are very different. And actually, we talked to a lot of the military professionals. I just came back from previously in my previous job, from a meeting with the Germans. They used to have 4,000 over main battle tanks. When I was the head of Army plans, we purchased the Leopard tanks because they downsized. They are now left with a couple of hundred tanks. And a lot of them are actually uncomfortable with the fact that the military has been reduced to this size. The German army, I think, is going to be about 70,000 strong. Now, Europe perhaps could cite NATO, could cite the peace dividend from the fall of the Cold War, but can you definitively say that peace will continue forever? And what happens if some things arise? You can't build an army overnight. So for us, I think every country needs to decide for itself. I think it's probably not fair also to comment on other countries, but for our needs, I think it's quite clear that the army remains a critical component, as with the Air Force and Navy. So I think what that to me shows is the length at which they're prepared to go to just to get into Parliament, to throw out popular options, be it in the economy side of the house or especially in this case, in national security, which I think it's important to highlight because while they come up with a lot of calculations, frankly, it doesn't hold water. And certainly it goes against the conventional wisdom of what we have learned, certainly in the past 10, 15 years.
But I would not even bother to answer in such details like VG Tan Chuan-Jin because he's from the army. I'll just say, go and ask NSP. Reduce army to what size? Please tell me. They say you reduce it by 100 men. I say that's no problem. They say reduce it by half. I say then you've got a problem, isn't it? Reduce it to 15 months NS. Do you know the consequences? Our national service pool is getting smaller and smaller because of the lower birth rate. So if you reduce it to 15 months, what are the consequences? So I would, in fact, attack them on this. Please give me the consequences of your suggestion. It's very good to just reduce minister salaries, reduce armed forces and so on, and put us on the defensive. But I have been the defense minister. I'm not at all defensive for what we do. So I will turn it around and say, what details do you have? I'm prepared to listen. I'm not deaf. I'm prepared to listen. Reduce army to what size? So I can go and ask them, please. Okay.
You said that the PAP now has to go on the offensive rather than trying to defend its positions like what it has done over the past few days. So are you suggesting maybe the PAP has been a bit maybe treating the opposition with rather velvet gloves?
In the battle, there are several phases. Phase 1 is when the track record of the PAP is being examined by the people, by the opposition. And of course, it is the opposition's job to try and attack us from all angles. It is their job, you see, and to exploit all the weaknesses there may be in our armor. So in phase 1, PAP has to explain and defend ourselves. See? And of course, in phase 1, the opposition is doing all the boxing, all the pummeling. And of course, we are doing all the defending. So we are now entering phase 2. Because elections is not about boxing, it's about basic issues. So phase 2 will now take us to what the real issues are. Not the track record of the PAP, but what the real issues are tomorrow. And this is where I have the advantage of in the battle, but not in the thick of battle. So I can step aside to examine the issues which are most pertinent to Singaporeans. So in my view, I think the most pertinent issues which Prime Minister Lee and his team will have to face after the election will be the ability to create jobs. Secondly, to tackle the cost of living. That's a real issue. Third, housing. That's a real issue. Because housing, for the new buyers, for those in the, shall we say, young people in the middle income group, if you're above the ceiling, after 1-2 years, it's not easy to get the cash to pay. So you would have to address this. I think on the longer term, he has to address the aging population issue. And of course, on a continuous basis, he has to address education, he has to address healthcare costs. Healthcare costs is not a big issue today. The healthcare costs will be an issue the next election and the one after. Because there are more and more old people, as you can see, healthcare costs will go up. So these are the real issues, and in round 2, the PAP would have to shift the debate on these issues. What opposition should not just criticize? What are your solutions? Anybody can criticize, but what are your solutions? So if they come up with a solution, then we can criticize them. Is that workable? Reduce the army, is that workable? So then you enter into a debate. So I want to shift from my position as in the battle, but not in the thick of it, to actually engaging on issues. And secondly, I want to also focus on the ability of whoever is in charge of Singapore to deliver on results on these issues. So this is where the people become very important. I use the term first-rate government, but that is a bit too vague. Let's not be practical. Who are the people in the PAP who will run the government after the election? Who are the people from the opposition parties? Should there be a strange result and then they are in government? So in the case of the PAP, which we expect to win, so I don't think there will be an opposition government, PM is a core team. It is a core team. When I was Prime Minister, I had a core team. My core team was Ong Teng Cheong, Tony Tan, Nana Balan, and Lee Hsien Loong. Those are my core team. Remember that at one time, Lee Hsien Loong had lymphoma. Ong Teng Cheong also had cancer. So as a PM, I was very, very worried because the core team which I have two pillars, crumbling because of cancer. So Tony Tan and Nana Balan had actually resigned from the cabinet to have their own interests outside. So I had no choice but to call them back. And Tony Tan and Nana Balan recognized the importance of the core team. I've had two pillars which were, in the sense, medically taken off for a while. So they came back to help me. And then, of course, later on, when I rebuilt the team with Jia Kumar, Wong Kan Seng, of course, Lee Hsien Loong recovered. Then those two left again. So let's examine in the coming, on 8th of May, after the election, when the dust is settled, who will be the core team? And that's key to Singapore. You have Lee Hsien Loong. His other core member is Joo Chiat, George Sheo. There are other core members, but these are the three core members who will be very important. Of course, Taman will become a core member. Taman is yet, is still new, but in time to come, will develop into a core member. So for the time being, these are the three key figures for him. On foreign policies, Minister George Sheo advises the Prime Minister on foreign policy. And of course, PM has his own views, they interact. Basically, the foreign minister advises him. So he's a very core member. So in the election, if, say, one GLC is lost, as MM said, we can accept the result. I agree with that. If one GLC is lost, we can accept. Sooner or later, you're going to lose one. But my view is if you lose Aljunied, that's a different matter. I've given my views, and that is George Sheo is too important a person for the cabinet to lose. So you have a core team, you lose George Sheo, then I think it's a very big loss to Singapore and to Singaporeans, not to Aljunied. Aljunied, without George Sheo, you lose it. We just all will be very sad. But the result is not of great consequence to Singapore. You lose George Sheo, there is consequence for Singapore. So you need to have this core team and put names down to the core team. Don't just talk generally, but who are the core members who implement policies, who come up with policies the day after the elections. So from my position, I look at the interests of Singaporeans. I say, okay, elections, a lot of excitement, a lot of allegations, a lot of counter-punching, by both sides. But the day after the election, when life goes back to normal, how do we make sure that Singaporeans can have a good life and can have the problems resolved? In fact, I spoke to PM before I came. I asked him what are the issues which he would attend to after the election. So he told me cost of living is a real issue. He has got to find a solution to it. And he said housing. He recognized that what they call the sandwich class, if you like, you see. And of course also the others, where you got to somehow find a way to solve the problems. It's not so easy, but he must find a way to solve the problems. And he's worried about healthcare costs in the longer term.
So
yep.
But should the PAP team be voted out? Does the PAP have a person in mind, a perfect candidate in mind to replace George Sheo as
at the moment, no. But of course, you have to find somebody.
So at the moment,
I do not know because it's for PM, and the thought hasn't come to our mind that George Sheo will lose. You see, not at this moment. But you must always have a foreign minister. The question is, people should know, if you go through, who will be a good foreign minister as good as George Yeo. And as I said the other day, George Yeo is in the middle of negotiating very delicate agreements with our neighbors, Indonesia and Malaysia. And the point is, you vote out George Yeo, what mistake has he made? Ask yourself. You know, I mean, if you can take a minister, you can criticize him for not delivering perhaps on housing, on transport. You know, like one country can say, vote him out because he let Mas Selamat escape. So, George Yeo, what has he done to deserve this? And he's a core member. I have run the government and know you need a core team. So we've got to go down to basic core team, and the core team is 4 or 5 people. The other ministers are important, but we need a core team. So for PM, as you can see, his core team will be himself, Joo Chiat and George Yeo. I'm not saying people at Wong Kan Sing are not members, but they are self-renewing themselves.
So what's the meaning of core? How integral, I mean, critical is core?
See, when you have a building, you have core pillars, right? And you have other pillars which are actually decorative. You can knock down the other pillars and the building will not collapse. And if you knock down the core pillar, you know, the building will collapse. So let's say take a building with 4 core pillars. Knock down one, that building will not collapse. You know, but would the building be strong enough? You knock down 2 pillars, the building may collapse.
So they are core because of the job scope that they do?
Because of the job scope plus the person's intellectual ability, his competence, and his ability to deliver results. That's the meaning of core, and somebody whom you trust the judgment of. Now, so when we have core members, it's a judgment whom I trust. Arguing democratically solutions, we can find. You know, we can debate, we get the best solution. But in many instances, it's judgment. You go this way, you go the other way, you know, then we debate and so on. Then we say, yes, this person has been given good advice, we take the advice. I work with George Yeo. He was a member of my team, but he was not yet a core team because he was a new member. So I've helped to build this core team for PM Lee. Therefore, I feel very strongly that Singaporeans don't think of their own interests. They don't think of their own interests. They just think of putting opposition, which is a separate interest. That's a separate problem. I'm not against that, but I'm saying, you know, whatever you do, there's got an effect on your life after that. So I'm approaching this from the point of core team.